This is a demonstration of the ScoreKeeper object that is available from the Alice project. To demonstrate this, I'm working with a world in which I've built a target using 4 disks from the Shapes gallery. We can look at how this program works in that I have a mouse-clicked event in which when one of the particular disks is clicked on, it fades in, fades out. So that when I run it, I click on the black disk, it fades in, fades out, yellow disk, blue disk, red disk. What I would prefer to do though is that when I click on one of these areas in my target, I want a score to be displayed and updated. And so I'm going to go to the gallery, and in the My Classes tab, I'm going to look for the ScoreKeeper object that I had exported before that is now available from the Alice project, and that I have placed in the My Classes directory of the Alice 3 directory in my home or documents directory on my system when Alice is installed. So I click and I drag the object into my world. I'm going to name it ScoreKeeper. And because I want to display values, not words, I'm going to change the value that's going to be displayed to a text string representation of 0. Click on select 0, click OK. Now, in importing an object, Alice displays the methods and the properties that are going to be imported with that object. I want them all, so click on Finish. And so there's my ScoreKeeper object in my world. I'm going to place it somewhere in my screen so that I can see it. Now, sometimes working with text objects, when I move things around, they disappear. You can get them, have the screen just refresh by going back to the code editor and then returning the scene editor. So here's my object, and I can set other properties with it just like any other Alice object. What I want to do now is examine this. So I'm going to go back to Edit Code. And when I select ScoreKeeper from the object menu, I see that there are some procedures that come along with it, including update score, initialize, set score, set target score, set increment. These come with the ScoreKeeper. I can get a better look or better understanding of how this class works by going to, and the ScoreKeeper is just a text model in which we have added the methods and procedures and properties that I've shown you. And so I can look at this text model, and I can see that the 3 properties are the current score. What is the current score that's being displayed that I'm keeping track of? What's the target? You know, is there a limit to my score? Is there an ending point, as it were? And is there an increment? How much every time that I increase the score, how much does it increase by? With these current property settings, I'm essentially describing to the class that I want the initial starting value to be 0, that I'm going to have a maximum value of 3 that I'm interested in, and I'm going to reach there in steps of 1 by incrementing by 1. Let me point out that score here is the numeric counter that keeps the running score for the object, but that it is different from this text property that belongs to the ScoreKeeper class. The text property at this point is 0, which is shown here, but this is a text, that's not a number. Updating the score does not automatically change this text. I have to link the two. In the same way that if I'm a basketball scorekeeper in a game, I keep a running score in the book, but then I also have to tell the person running the scoreboard what the new score is. to be updated. So we need to be sure and be clear we understand that there are two values that we're working with. One that keeps this internal score that we will use for our game purposes. But then also there is a representation of the score, that is this text value. Usually when we think of scorekeeping, we think starting at 0 and working up and really not even worrying about a target or a top value, unless we're doing something like first person to 10 or first person to 21. And normally we increment by 1. We go up 1 at a time. But there are times in a basketball game, for example, where we may increment by 2 or we may increment by 3. There may also be kinds of games in which we want to keep track of removal of objects, that I have starting off with a certain number of objects and I want to count down until there are none left. I can imagine that kind of game that students might be interested in building. So what I can do in that case is go to the score and set the value of number of objects that I'm starting with, in this case 5. My target is 0. And my increment, in this case, is going to be -1. And so what I'm saying is that there are 5 objects left in the world that I want to count down until there's none left, and I want to get there by removing 1 at a time from the score. I can also use this same mechanism as a timekeeper, where I can start with, say, a score of 60, but it's actually going to be a starting time of number of seconds left. Again, going down to 0 with an increment of -1. So we can use this ScoreKeeper both for keeping score and for keeping time if we wish. I'm going to restore my initial values here to what we started with before. And now let's examine the procedures initialize and update score. Update score essentially is the mechanism by which we do two things. We take the current score, whatever the running score is at that moment in time when we call this procedure, and we add the increment to it. And then we reset the current score so that 2 becomes 3, 3 becomes 4, and so forth. But then at the same time, remembering what the comments I made about making sure that the text value gets changed, I have to take the score that I have set here and given it to the object so that the 3D model represents the new value. Suppose, however, I don't want to set up these values when I first add the model to the object, but instead as part of the program. I may ask the user for target value or increment value or so forth. How can I do that within Alice? So we would go to my first method and select ScoreKeeper from our object menu. And we now have the initialize procedure that I can drag into wherever I need it, my code. And it's going to ask me, all right, what's my starting score going to be? Start at 0. I'm going to select a custom number, and I'm going to increment by 2 in this case. All right, and then the custom number is 20. So now I'm initializing the object, but now this is within the code, not in setup, in which I initialize the starting score to 0, ending score to 20, increment value of 2. I may also want, in a game that's ongoing, to set these values independently or at different times as the program is running. So I have 3 values to set the starting score, to set the target score, to set the increment. So I may say, okay, what's the target score? And this time I can add the value, I want to go to 50 with an increment of 5. Let's look at how I would use the ScoreKeeper object in practice. Delete these 2 lines of code. Let's This is a game, remember, in which I was clicking on different areas of the target. Now, what I want to happen is when I click on red, when the red area is hit, for example, my score will increase by 1, blue area score will increase by 2, yellow area score will increase by 5, and black, the score will increase by 10. In order to implement the solution, I'm going to use the setIncrement method and the updateScore method of the ScoreKeeper class. By setting the increment, I can set the target values for 1, 2, 5, or 10 as needed, depending on which of the disks is clicked on. And updateScore uses that current value then for calculating the new score. So in order to do this, in the if statement, if the model clicked on is the red one, I drag in setIncrement, and I set the value to 1, then I update the score, so that when I run the method and click on the red disk, the score updates by 1. I can now do this for the other disks in the problem. SetIncrement for the blue disk to 2, update that score. SetIncrement for the yellow disk to 5, and update that score. And then finally, setIncrement for the black disk to 10, and update that score. So that now, when I run my program, click on the red disk, score increments by 1, click on the blue disk, score increments by 3, click on the yellow disk, score increments by 5, click on the black disk, score increments. So this has been a demonstration of the ScoreKeeper class that the Alice project has created and is distributing for those who are interested in using it. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at the email address dawn@alice.org. I hope this has been helpful, and have fun building your projects.